Welcome, everyone, to our episode 37 of our podcast, Cultivating a New Generation. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about is sleep consistency an important to improve your brain, an important asset, an important activity that you should do? To talk about this topic, the article that we are going to discuss is the thermodynamic brain and the evolution of the intellect, the role of mental energy. So this is how we are going to uncover the purpose of achieving this discussion and giving you the tools so that you can really improve and take more into account how sleep is affecting your mind. Sleep inconsistency is highly prevalent in modern societies and usually related to work-induced sleep and circadian misalignment on weekdays, with subsequent compensatory sleep on the weekends. The current study sheds light on the changes in brain function and associated with the weekdays that you have consistency in your sleep and the weekend days that you try to recover from the week in healthy adults. While the weekend catch-up sleep is correlated with enhanced task-induced deactivation of the default mode network, and this DMN, that is the abbreviation of the default mode network, connectivity with occipital cortex at rest, and inconsistent sleep timing, referred to as the social jet lag, have detrimental effects on behavior and brain function during task and at rest. So what happens is that whenever you start disrupting your circadian rhythms in terms of the sleep that you have, your working days, your everyday, your week, and then you try to recover during the weekend, you have a slower or deprived activation during performing task or at resting state in terms of the functional connectivity that you have with this default mode network. And the findings indicate that there is a beneficial effect of consistent bedtime and catch-up sleep on the weekends, depending on the age, depending on how much also you deprive of your sleep. Sleep loss and circadian misalignment are common in modern societies and deteriorate various aspects of cognitive performance. To compensate for work-induced sleep restriction and circadian misalignment, there is a tendency to sleep in and align better with the inner circadian clock on the weekends, which leads to sleep inconsistencies between your weekdays and the weekend. However, it is unclear whether the weekend um, recovering time or catch-up sleep can help you recover from your weekdays sleep restriction, and whether it is beneficial to switch back toward a better alignment with the internal circadian clock on the weekends. That's the discussion, that's the hypothesis of this kind of study. And the findings are that whenever you have the weekend catch-up sleep longer to the relative week duration, it was associated with poor attention and with poor academic performance in adolescents and young adults. So this kind of shifting activity between sacrificing sleep during your weekdays and then trying to recover on the weekend, which is very common in adolescents and young adults, is not working well in terms of the attention that they are going to have. And that's why we are seeing a lot of trying to label them as deficit of attention, which is not that, it's just a lack of sleep. So whenever larger variation is in the sleep timing between the weekend and the weekdays, there is more social jet lag, which is reflected in that circadian rhythm misalignment. What is this misalignment of your internal clocks or the circadian rhythms? It refers to many activities that your clocks are doing, also controlling your hormones, hunger hormones, controlling many reproductive hormones as well, controlling many neurotransmitters, and biasing yourself towards many addictive behaviors, which is also being correlated with the increased vulnerability of drug use in adolescents. So that's what we are seeing, and that's the explanation, because when we disrupt this kind of internal clocks, there is more lack of the pool of neurotransmitters, the production of these neurotransmitters, and that will lead in the end to the biasing or to the predisposition of drug use in adolescents. One study showed that weekend catch-up sleep lowered the risk for hypertension in Korean adults I'm referring, indicating that sleeping in the weekend might be beneficial for adults. Studies of how this correlation between weekends and weekdays sleeping consistency affect brain function still have been limited to the knowledge that the researchers have. Only one neuroimaging study has been reported, and it showed that larger weekend to weekdays sleep timing inconsistency was associated with decreased medial prefrontal cortex and striatal responses to reward in adolescents. So this is what we are talking about. The prefrontal cortex is the region that regulates the thinking, the attention, focusing on things, and also controlling your impulses. So if you are down-regulated because you are disrupting your weekday sleep patterns, then you also need a higher threshold in the reward system in order to get the satisfaction or the pleasure that you are looking in any kind of activity. It can be, of course, addiction to the cell phones, to the social media. It can be addiction to any kind of drug, of course, but that is the root cause, the inconsistency of sleep between weekdays and weekend. Two independent studies or researchers proposes to regulate sleep. One is circadian rhythmicity, which control sleep timing, and the homeostatic sleep pressure, which accumulates during wakefulness and declines with sleep. And these two processes distinctly modulate the brain during a sustained attention task. Sleep depth have negative effects on high order association cortices that span the frontal, the parietal, and the insular and cingulate regions, whereas circadian rhythmicity modulated subcortical areas and few cortical areas, including the visual and sensory motor cortices. Translated into easier narrative, what it's saying is that these studies found out that whenever you have this sleep depth between your weekdays and your weekend, what you are doing is disrupting several regions in your brain that are going also to affect visual responsiveness or your vision and sensory motor responses, that is your reactions. And we can see that very often in terms of whenever we don't sleep well, even if you are an adolescent or a young person, your reflexes are not the same as when you have a good night's sleep. Imagine if the inconsistency is every week, you are disrupting more and more these areas of the brain. In this study, they assessed the weekend patterns against the weekdays inconsistency in terms of the duration and the timing, and they correlated with the attentional performance associated with brain activation, which is known to be sensitive to sleep loss, and whether these differences in task-related activity were concurrent with differences in resting state and functional connectivity. So what are they going to do? Now they are going to compare what is the disruption or what is the effect of not sleeping well during your weekdays and trying to recover during the weekend in terms of how you respond to tasks whenever you are doing something and you are trying to concentrate, or when you are in a rest state. And this was analyzed with several visual cues and their response, and also challenging the persons with task in increasing in terms of the difficulty of the task. So what they found is that these experiences, this disruption in the circadian rhythms, have much more effect on the people that are more of the circadian rhythm pattern of the evenings, meaning the people that sleep later at night. So we have different kind of circadian patterns, different kinds of chronotypes, that's the technical name. And when you function better, or when you have better responses in terms to concentrating at later in the afternoon or closer to the night, that means that your chronotype works much better in that timing. So you will have lower disruption, higher disruption, I'm sorry, in terms of sacrificing the sleep with the weekdays and trying to recover during the weekend. For the people that are morning types, they have lower disruption in terms of these kind of responses when they try to recover during the weekend. That doesn't mean that is a recommendation. That just means the differences of the chronotypes. This study that analyzed the weekend sleep and against the weekdays examined the association between sleep inconsistency and attention in terms of the brain activation. And what they could find out, it was that the weekdays displayed a better attentional performance. So the people, the group of people that had consistency during the week displayed much better attentional performance that was associated with greater function of this DMN or default mode network deactivation and higher functional connectivity between the anterior part, the occipital cortex, at rest. This means that all your areas are connected much better and they are sending the signals in present moment time, in real time, much better whenever you have a consistency in your weekdays of sleep against trying to recover during the weekends. So in the other group, the people that have longer weekend sleep, they were much lower in terms of the reaction of the task and visual cues also. And they had poor connectivity between the areas related with visual performance and reaction time. They also had many inconsistency in the sleep duration correlated with worse attentional performance and lower occipital activation in terms of the response to the task and in terms of the connection with this default network. This default network is very important in terms of allowing your mind to rest, because whenever you are in a stage of concentration, your brain needs to also have some breaks, have some spaces, and we spoke about that in our last episode about the energy of the brain and how can we enhance the energy of our brains. And in terms of that, this default network functions as the pit area in the racing cars. The racing cars need to go to this pit area to change tires, to give a quick, very, very quick checkup of the whole engine of the cars. And then they can go and have much better performance. Your brain works very similar in terms of that. So this default network is like your pit area for your brain. Consistent with the hypothesis of the researchers, longer weekend sleep duration relative to the weekdays duration of sleep was associated with better attentional performance in terms of adult subjects. This beneficial effect was only observed at the beginning, but not at the end of the work week. So we can have this beneficial effect, but just for probably 2 days. Then once you get to the third day or to the middle of the week, you are going to start losing your energy, having a dissipation of this sleep benefit, and having a accumulation of that sleep debt that you have. So what is going to happen in terms of your awareness? Well, you will have a deactivation of the inferior parietal lobe, including the right area or the right part of your amygdala, which is essential also for your visospatial awareness. The influence of sleep loss on this region of the brain will damage cognitive tasks in terms of the solving problem capacities that you will have. And we also have seen that, we also have experienced that whenever we have this sleep debt during the week and we are trying to concentrate, we are trying to solve problems, we are trying to face challenges with any kind of activity, we are having a hard time and we have a poorer mood state and mood regulation. There is also reported patients with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder in terms of this unbalance of the sleep between the weekdays and the weekend. So all of these things are accumulating. Don't you think that you are going to get away with not sleeping well during the week, even if you are an adolescent or a young, or worse, if you are in those kind of range of age, because your brain is still under development, and many of the regions that are affected are still trying to connect and expand this network of connection in terms also of the production of neurotransmitters. That is the most demanding time that your neurotransmitters need to be regulated in order for you to be a stable human being and not be biasing or predisposing yourself toward any kind of addiction. With larger weekend to weekdays sleep duration, mainly they reflect in the healthy adults. And as we mentioned, it just lasts for 1 or 2 days. Then the severe sleep debt accumulated over the weekdays are going to have repercussion in your health. Also, not sleeping well is associated with inflammation, is associated with dysregulation of your insulin levels, and of course, is going to predispose you to generate chronic illnesses such as diabetes, hypertension, and all of these chronic range of diseases in addition to gaining weight. A recent study reported that less default mode network activation predicted greater task effort avoidance. What does this mean? Lower DMN deactivation in sleep-deprived individuals could reflect their reduced meditation to exert effort. That's why they are apathetic, they are lazy. That's why they don't have energy and they don't have even mood to do many things because of the lack of sleep or the inconsistency of sleep, which is a vicious cycle if you think about it, because adolescents or young adults um, sacrifice their sleep due to the attachment of social media or TV or distractions, not because they are really trying to study more. So they are just doing that, or they are partying, or they are just chatting, or they are doing any kind of distractional activities that is priming their brain to get a higher dosage of dopamine. All of these resources, all of these new digital devices, what they do is that they generate more demand. The more you are connected to these kind of devices, the more you are watching also the blue light and permeating um, through your eyes, you are absorbing that kind of light. And that is the most toxic light that you can have at night. And that is the reason that they also start disrupting many of these internal clocks. And that's why they have this poor attention. They don't have energy. They don't want to do or solve problems. They don't want to deal with almost anything. They are just in a sedentary lifestyle. They are just caged in a life where they don't find meaning, where they find identity problems. In addition to that, imagine that they are comparing all the time in these social platforms. So it is a whole toxic environment that they are creating and damaging a lot of these kind of hormones, patterns, neurotransmitter production, and of course, many more things in terms of inflammation and all of these chronic predisposition for illnesses. The findings of these authors were consistent with two-process model of sleep regulation and with the findings of other authors, such as Muto et al., and they process distinctly how they affect their brain. So misalignment of these circadian rhythms in the subcortical regions could be attributed to lower sensitivity of the multiband for detecting subcortical signals. What does this mean? This means that your signaling of the regions between your brain, between the occipital part, the parietal part, and the prefrontal cortex, they are just mixed up. You are confused, you don't know what to do with these messages. So of course, whenever we feel confused or overwhelmed, and many of the neurotransmitters are not in the proper quantity, we won't have attention and we will be more impulsive. We will be less able to regulate our emotions, and we will have, of course, a lot of energy deprivation. The study revealed that the more you disrupt this default mode network, and the more inconsistency you have in the sleep duration and the timing, there is more deactivation and there is more disruption of your internal clocks that interferes with the dopamine signaling. What does this mean? Dopamine is the is the most important neurotransmitter in terms of regulating your emotions, in terms of regulating the solving area problem of your brain, and in terms of preventing you to develop any kind of addiction. So Considering this, the independent effect of inconsistent sleep duration with sleep timing, future studies will be able to evaluate and differentiate how they affect the dopamine function. These studies are going to help you to see the possibility of changing again our brains or reversing the effect. And it is simpler. We don't really need to wait for these kind of studies. We just know what to do. What to do in order to regulate again the sleep deficiency and the disruption of all these patterns, being consistent with your sleep. That doesn't mean that you cannot ever go to a party. That doesn't mean that you cannot ever go to a movie at night. That doesn't mean that you cannot watch at certain weekends these kind of things or entertainment things in the TV, but don't do it consistently. Try to regulate yourself in terms of having the most consistent timing and sleep duration during your weeks, during your weekdays, and during the weekend, so that you can have proper production of neurotransmitters, so that you can have regulation of your hormones, so that you can have more energy, so that you can have much better cleaning of your epigenetic marks, and so that your regions of your brain, every area of your brain, starts connecting the messages, the signals, and you will be able to have much better mood, much better attention, much better solving problem skills. And of course, you will be able to generate motivation for life, and you won't be losing time in these kind of activities. You will be much more able to connect with other people, to interact, and to socially expand your life. So that is the message of this kind of reflection and this kind of article that we reviewed. And I want to correct something. The article name is Sleep Inconsistency Between Weekends and Weekdays Associated with Changes in Brain Function During Task and Rest. The author, the first author, is Sang R, and it's from 2020. I'm sorry for the mistake at the beginning. This is the correct article. So thank you very much for paying attention. If you like these kind of lessons, this kind of reflection in terms of the health and the sleep inconsistency and the findings, please help me to share with people, because many young people need to know what happens with their brain, because they are damaging in the long term. And it is also mentioned in this article that it has a predisposition to develop dementia, Alzheimer, and any other kind of chronic illnesses. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, and we'll listen to each other on our next episode. Bye.